Hello internet, and today's video is going to be another book opinion, those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book. And today's book is going to be Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. So I read this a while ago. I read it in like 2 days. It's a really quick book, or at least it was for me. I liked it well enough. I kind of was under the misassumption or misunderstanding that this book was somehow going to tie into the movie. Not like a direct tie-in, but they were going to be like similar-ish, because when marketing was happening for the movie, it was also tied in for the book at the same time. Those two are not connected at all, other than the fact that both have the character of Wonder Woman and are about the character of Wonder Woman. So yeah, don't go into this book thinking it's gonna be connected to the movie, because it's not. It's its own thing. I don't know why I thought that, but like based on the marketing strategy, for some reason I got that in my head. So the main plot of this book is, of course, following Diana. So we start off on the island of the Amazons, Themyscira, and there's this giant storm and a girl washes up on shore. And this girl is has cursed blood in her. She is a descendant of Helen of Troy, and she is a warbringer. Basically, when she comes of age, then something kind of clicks in her, and by her very presence, she becomes a catalyst for war and bad things and evil things. It's just a curse on her family. And when she lands on the Isles of Themyscira, it's just about time for her to awaken as the Warbringer. So Diana's having her own little issues with her family on Themyscira, not really being respected and seen as an adult because she is the youngest. She hasn't really been tested or trained or anything like that, and she ends up finding this girl and finding out what she is, and instead of killing her because she can potentially bring war and destruction, she ends up leaving Themyscira with the girl in search of a way to break the curse. And that's basically this whole book. I think this book doesn't get good for at least 50 pages. The first 50 pages, all these people are unlikable. Like, I did not like any of these characters for the first 50 pages. Diana was okay, but I thought she was a little bit whiny. This girl, whose name I can't remember, she just got on my nerves for the first 50 pages. Like, Diana's trying to talk to her. Diana's like, hey, this is where you are. Diana's trying to explain like things that seem impossible, and this girl's not listening. She's just like, I want to go home, I want to go home. And Diana's trying to explain, there is something wrong. You have a curse. Like, look at what's happening. See, this is this result. And this girl is not listening, does not give two shits what Diana has to say. And I was done. I was done with her for those first 50 pages when she started doing that. I think the whole time on Themyscira is probably the weakest part of the whole book. That little section, the characters end up unlikable, they end up whiny, they don't really converse to each other, they just kind of talk past each other, which really doesn't make for any sort of good dialogue, and you don't get a feel for any of these characters other than they're kind of irritating. When they get to New York, then the Warbringer chick, she gets a little less irritating because she's finally home. So she gets a little bit more promising for how she's acting and her character development and stuff like that. I think a lot of this book suffered from being rushed too quickly, too fast. It just felt like you were going dun 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 without any really time to stop and pause. And when you did stop and pause, it kind of was like, I don't want to say it was too slow, but it was like a bunch of nothing happening until something happens, something happens, something happens, something happens, and then some nothing happens, and it had some little weird pacing going through. I think once you get past the first 50 pages and once you get to New York, the story ends up not bothering you as much with the pacing being off, because you end up being interested more in the characters when there's not plot stuff going on, and when there's plot stuff going on, like, you're not paying attention to how shit the characters can be sometimes. So I don't know if this is a good review or a bad review. It's just kind of, I thought the book was decent, but there were some issues I had with like pacing, with characters in the first 50 pages. There was definitely some problems with plot. There is a point in time where they end up trying to go to the place where they're going to heal her, and we discover like who the villain is, like how far they have to travel. Like, of course, there is a deadline for like when they can get this done. They're being chased down by people because there's of course people who know about the Warbringer but don't want her to awaken as the Warbringer because they don't want to bring war, and like all of this sort of stuff that culminates towards the end, and it ends up getting a little messy and jumbled at the end there because your plot feels a little too rushed, especially with the villain. When you figure out like who one of the villains is, you're just like, okay. It wasn't like a bad villain reveal, and it definitely made sense that this person was the villain, but at the same time, the way it was revealed was kind of like weak. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, it was like, oh, okay. And then continuing with like the fights and the battles and like the little rush journey because we only have like 2 minutes left, that kind of started feeling a little meh instead of being like really exciting, like really like, yes, I'm here for it. You were kind of like, oh, okay, this is pretty entertaining. Oh, okay, like I'm having a pretty decent time. So I guess my point is, for the most of this book, there's nothing like wow factor about it. Most of it is like, oh, it's a pretty decent book. Oh, it's a pretty good time. At least that's how it was for me. I was not amazed. I was not like, whoo, out here with it. I think my favorite character at the end of the day was Diana. I did like her fight scenes. I thought a lot of her fight scenes were really good. The one that sticks in my mind that got me the most hype was one that they had at a dinner party. I thought that was absolutely fabulous. So there are some like good gems in there with like fight scenes and conversations with characters, but I think a lot of my issue with this book was there's pacing problems and there's problems with the plot and how things are divulged in the plot. Not that the plot doesn't make sense, because the plot makes perfect sense, but just how things unfold don't really excite you or feel wow-ish. They just kind of feel like, oh, that's how the plot's supposed to go. Oh, that's great, I guess. Like, it's not bad, it's just okay. And that's my main point, is that I think this is my least favorite Leigh Bardugo book. I think her writing style definitely works better when she is in full control of her characters and her stories, and she's not trying to work within some sort of guideline, because I don't know what sort of guideline she was given for this book, but her writing style and the way that she paces things definitely works better when she has more control over the characters and the story than it did for Wonder Woman Warbringer, because again, those first 50 pages, they were horrible. The rest of it gets pretty good, but then we have a little bit of issue with the pacing, then we have a little bit of issue with the plot, and the plot actually exciting you and not just feeling pretty meh and workable. So again, not the worst book I've read, definitely a good book. I had a good time when I read it. I just realized that there are some issues with the book and that it could have definitely been better than what it was. So I would not give this book a raving review, but I would definitely say that if you want to read this book and if you already know you like superheroes, then you're probably going to have a pretty decent time. Like, if this is the type of book that you like, you're probably not gonna hate it. And maybe if you're not familiar with superheroes, you might like this book as well. I'm not quite sure this is a book that anyone's absolutely gonna loathe. It is a decent book, but I don't think there's going to be like an outstanding love for this book, because like honestly, I have not heard anybody talk about this book in quite a long time since it first came out. And again, I feel like I only heard about this book when it was connected to the movie marketing as well. So, you know, that's its own thing. I'm not quite even sure what's going on with this little series that they're doing with all these little heroes being rewritten, because isn't there that Batman book and then the Catwoman book that's also connected to whatever DC arc thing that they're doing? I don't know. I don't know. It was decent. It was okay. You probably won't hate it. You'll probably have a pretty decent time. It's not a book that I would like spend a bunch of money on, but it's a book that I would like borrow from my library. It's one of those books. It's like I like it. I would definitely borrow it from the library, but I don't love it enough that I would own a copy. Like I never had any strong feelings about it enough that I would purchase it for any reason. Like, you know, and I like purchasing books, so that says something, right? I didn't have any strong feelings about this book. It was pretty okay, and that's how I'm gonna end this. So, I want to ask you guys, is there any books, like any characters that you would love to see an author write about? So like here, in comic books, we have a lot of characters that go through different authors discussing these characters, giving their life, like how Leigh Bardugo talked about Wonder Woman this time and wrote her own version of Wonder Woman. What is a character that you really love, and what author would you like to see write about that character? So yeah. If you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those bunnies down below, and goodbye, Internet.